This interview is with one of my favorite people, JC. She is known as Lady Carnivore. She has a YouTube channel. She is a huge following on social media. So you can find her there. But she also runs with Barbara Williams. So JC Gregory and Barbara Williams run the SIRS support group, which has great information if you have chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is SIRS. So we talk a little bit about that. Of course, we talk about carnivore and meat, and we talk about JC's OCD getting cured. OCD, carnivore cured her OCD, but then also like some of the struggles that have continued that she's working through since she is working through mold illness and SIRS. And JC is just a beautiful person. So I love talking to her and see where she is right now on her journey and what she's working on. So we talk about that too. You can find the interview that I did with JC, oh gosh, probably a year ago, maybe on my YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked that out, you can go check that out too. It was a great interview and it's always fun. So happy healing. Hope you enjoy this episode. JC, I'm so excited to have you back so that I can interview you for the Nurse Soul podcast.
Thank you for having me on. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you.
I love talking to you. You're always just like a breath of fresh air, kind of a sunshine for me. I know that you probably are for a lot of people, but you may not know that. And so you should know that you're like sunshine for some of us.
Coming from a fellow Sunbeam, that just means the world.
You know, I wanted to talk about meat and mental health because that's the series that I want to do. But of course, we need to talk about SIRS and how that relates. But before we do that, you had a poem that you posted a couple of days ago that just really, I think I put wow a couple of times because it was like, it's dark because you're trying too hard.
Hmm.
Lightly, lightly, dear. And I was like, oh, that really hit for me. So I kind of wanted to know what was going on for you when you posted that. What are you thinking? And yeah, just how powerful that is when those of us who feel like it's dark because we're working too hard.
Yeah, absolutely. So that quote is actually by Aldous Huxley,
That's
which
right.
I find ridiculous because he wrote Brave New World. Not sure if you're familiar with his book, but he also wrote a children's book about crows. It's like this weird tangential topic, but definitely check it out if you haven't. It's adorable. But yeah, it's this whole concept of we create our reality, right? Like our reality is built out of the thoughts that we have in our head. And so one of my favorite practices is when I feel like I'm struggling, I like to ask better questions. So our brains are problem solvers. It's what their job is. They're really good at it. So anytime you ask your brain a question, it's going to answer it. So kind of speaking to the dark versus light concept, if you ask yourself, why is this so hard? Your brain is going to come up with 1,000 different answers as to why something is really difficult. But if you ask your brain, how can I make this easier? It's giving it a problem that it can solve. And so that is a practice that I go back to time and time again. And I think that poem really speaks to this concept of life is what you make it. And if you make it difficult for yourself or more difficult than it needs to be, you're just putting that burden on yourself. You can choose to take things more lightly and you can choose to live more lightly. And it's just a quote that always resonates with me all of the time.
Yeah, it really resonated with me too. Unencumbered, the last word, unencumbered. You know, you're tiptoeing in quicksand, my dear. Go as unencumbered as you can. And I was like, oh, because I can really make things quite complicated. I mean, my family sort of laughs because they're like, I can make a picnic a stressful event because I want it to be done well. And I put a lot into what I do. And so I just the other day was thinking something about struggle. I can't remember exactly now what it was, but it was like, why do some people struggle so much and other people don't? Why is it that some people find their way to healing and they have these miraculous healing and other people don't? Like, what is it? And all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, I just heard free will. And I was like,
Mm.
you've got to be kidding me. Like, literally, a choice. Always we have a choice. And so I really appreciate that, because in the struggle, you can ask, why is this so hard? Why is this so hard? Why is this so hard? Or you can say, how could I make this easier? How could I
Mhm.
pivot out of this place? And I have been in that space for a while. Like, how can I make this easier? What choice can I make that would feel lighter? So I love that. I think that's beautiful.
I love that quote so much. And it's a little bit of a read, but I think you need that. Like I think you need to be told that concept over and over. And it's a daily journal practice for myself of how am I feeling? What are the thoughts causing that feeling? How do I want to feel? And what thought do I need to have that feeling? And that's how I start every morning, is just choosing how I want to feel for the day.
Oh, that's a nice way to start the day. I call that the power hour. So you hear a lot of people talk about the power hours, the first hour of the day, but really it's the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes before you go to bed. So how you choose to spend that time, it's wise to spend that in a way that is going to orient your day towards a lighter distance, I guess.
Well, I'm not going to tell you my pre-bed routine then.
Is it not lighter?
It's not the last 30 minutes. I do spend time every evening. So every evening I have this concept of giving gifts to myself, giving gifts to my future self. So what I do is I love this concept. So what I do is I take care of my morning self in the evening. So like I'll put out my vitamins, I'll prepare my coffee pot, I'll put out the clothes I'm going to wear the next day, and that's me taking care of my future self. It's gifts for morning JC who is tired and needs a little extra help. But then the last like hour before bed, and I know this goes against like everything everyone says about sleep hygiene, but I like watch anime before bed. And
Mhm.
that's how I like to fall asleep.
You and my almost 18-year-old every night. You got to have but I love the ritual of preparing for your future self. I mean, that's a beautiful ritual that you have every night. That's awesome. And you know
Yeah,
what works for you. And you've been through a lot. So you should know that what works for you, you should keep. That's
absolutely. The way having chronic illness has been such a blessing for me, and it feels weird to say that because there were times last year when I was in so much pain that I would have done anything to not have had that chronic illness. But now, on the other side of it, looking back, I wouldn't change a single thing. It has
right.
made me more empathetic. It has made me more appreciative of my own body. Like I am just so enamored with my body's ability to heal. It's just such a glorious, beautiful, magnificent thing. Our bodies want to heal. Our bodies want to be healthy. We just have to give them the right tools and then get out of our own way.
Yeah, we could probably spend the whole time talking about how we get out of our own way. But we're just it. I mean, there are ways to look at your thinking, to see how you're feeling, to set yourself up, rituals that you do. So I guess the chronic illness. So if people didn't see, we talked last maybe July, and it was on my YouTube channel, so people can go check that out. But you were in the middle, really towards maybe working your way to the end of the Shoemaker protocol, right?
I had actually just started. So I
Was
was
that just
diagnosed.
starting? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was Barbara and I were talking about this yesterday.
Yeah.
We wished each other a happy Stars anniversary because we were both diagnosed in May and we started treatment in June. So I was actually 1 month into the
Oh,
protocol.
that's right. Yeah, so May, okay, it's May. That's exciting that you're, where you are now compared to where you were when you started this. So let's tell people where you were when you started. You were carnivore, so you had a lot of healing that happened from eating a carnivore diet. So we can talk a little bit about that, because I do want to talk about how mental health and how meat helps with mental health. But I also want people to understand how much pain you were in when you had this chronic illness when you were diagnosed last May.
Yeah, so backing way back when I was
Way back. Okay.
way back, when I was 15, I was diagnosed with OCD.
Right.
Uh, And at that time, I was a vegetarian. Coincidence? Who knows? Probably. I also developed eating disorders at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Coincidence? Maybe. Eventually, as a young adult, I overcame those eating disorders, but I still had OCD, and I did different therapies and medications for that over time, and nothing really moved the needle for me.
Mhm.
So mine was very much checking things.
Yes.
So I would check very specifically. I would try to leave my house, and then I would be like, oh, did I lock the door? And I would walk back up the stairs to my second floor apartment and check that the door was locked. And then I'd walk back to my car and be like, oh, did I lock the door? And then I would walk up the flight of stairs, check that the door was locked. And logically, I knew that the door was locked. I would not have walked away from the door if the door was not locked. But the OCD compulsion just made me go back and forth. And this would happen like 50 to 100 times.
Mhm.
Sometimes I would give up. I would be like, I'm not leaving my house today. This is too difficult. And for anyone who hasn't had compulsive behavior like that, every time you go back to check, it heightens your anxiety. So it's almost this like feedback loop from hell where you're trying to get away from the door, but every time you check the door, you have to check. It's like the compulsion increases to check the door. So
Yeah.
sometimes I would just give up and not leave my house. And depending on like where I was in my life journey, like at moments of greater stress,
Mhm.
I just wouldn't leave my home. So I was very much housebound in those moments. And then the other manifestation I had was medical fear. Like I would become convinced that moles on my body were going to kill me. And so I would remove them myself. And multiple times I would have to like go get them stitched up by a doctor. And then eventually my doctor was like, okay, this is weird. You keep having these moles just come off your body. And so I was very close to being, you know, put in a situation where I would not have had the choice about getting psychological care for this.
Mhm.
So I tried, rejection therapy, behavioral therapy. I tried antidepressants, antipsychotics, mood stabilizers. I tried a lot of different things over the years.
Mhm.
And eventually a coworker who she was like, I'm going to try this new diet. It's called keto and you just eat a lot of fat. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to kill yourself. Like you can't eat that way. So me being the giant nerd that I am, I went on PubMed and I looked up research about the keto diet and I
Mhm. So
found
you could
that
prove. Mhm.
yeah, I was going to prove that she was going to
Yeah.
kill herself. And lo and behold, actually helps reduce inflammation. And I had some joint pain at the time. That was my first motivation was just light joint pain. I did keto and it changed my life. However, I found it really difficult to stick to. I'm a very black and white person. So if I was 1 gram over my carbs, I was like, well, might as
Might
well,
as well just have at it now.
yeah, all
Yeah.
the carbs. So
Yes.
eventually I heard about carnivore and I was like, oh, it's easy keto. You don't have to do the carb tracking. But carnivore was a different experience for me.
Mhm.
It where I had lessened brain fog with keto, carnivore actually helped eliminate the OCD compulsions. So I always thought of the OCD compulsions as like this annoying toddler in the back of my mind, like nagging me all the time, telling me that these terrible things were going to happen if I didn't act on the compulsion. And about a month into carnivore, it was like I just noticed that that toddler was a little quieter.
Mm.
And it wasn't immediate. I would say it probably took 6 months for me to fully not experience any of the toddler or any of the compulsion. But it was enough buy-in in that first 30 days that when I saw my doctor and she was like, "Oh, no, she was like, your numbers look great, but you should be eating lean meats and vegetables." And I was like, "Are they great or do you want me to eat lean meats and vegetables?"
Right.
Which is it.
Right.
Um, So as a carnivore, I experienced the lessened joint pain, which allowed me to work out. So eventually I did a fitness competition, but then following that, I had a health crisis.
Mhm.
Very suddenly, I was experiencing plantar fasciitis. I had uveitis, which is inflammation of the inner eye, to the point where my pupil was completely misshapen. I couldn't see out of that eye. Terrible GI issues. And then eventually enthesis or enthesitis, which is inflammation of tendons and ligaments.
Mhm. Mhm.
From that, I got a diagnosis of ankylosing spondylitis, which is a fancy way of saying your spine eventually fuses to your hips. It's a spondyloarthropathy and it's related to other arthritises like reactive arthritis. I'm just
Mhm.
going to say all the fancy words for the SEO.
Okay. That's
Okay.
great. That's perfect. But it's essentially an autoimmune disorder.
Yes, and it's tied to HLA-B27, which is the haplotype that is typically associated with spondyloarthropathies. But it is an autoimmune condition, and I was kind of told by my rheumatologist, I called him because I was in so much pain. I was in so much pain every day and I wanted relief. I wanted escape. And he basically told me that he didn't think I was experiencing a flare of this condition, that this was like my new baseline for life. And I could not wrap my brain around that idea. And I think it's pretty natural when you're faced with a situation like that for your brain to look for all possible routes of escape. And so I started experiencing suicidal ideation.
Yep.
And
Hmm.
that was the first time I had ever experienced anything like that. And I think that I am somebody who I like to learn. And so I like to learn from a lot of different sources. And so I actually knew that suicidal ideation was something that can happen to people who are in these situations where they don't feel like they have an escape. It's
Right.
like your brain finding answers. It's just
Right.
giving you all possible solutions. So I knew that that was what was happening. I also knew that there was a certain level of depression that I was experiencing from this chronic pain that I needed to address. I actually posted a story right after I had that conversation with the rheumatologist where I was like, I can't live this way. And Nutrition with Judy Cho reached out to me and she's like, I think you might have this thing called SIRS. And I looked into it for about half a second and I was like, absolutely not. So SIRS, or chronic inflammatory response syndrome, happens when somebody who's genetically predisposed to being really bad at eliminating a biotoxin encounters that biotoxin. And I was like, this doesn't sound, I have an autoimmune condition. This isn't me. So I, like the ignoramus I am, shut down Judy Cho.
But
But
not for
she is
too long. It's okay.
she is an actual angel because she reached out to me again, being like, no, really, I think you might have this. And at that point, I gave it a closer look. I spent like an entire weekend just consuming all the content I could about chronic inflammatory response syndrome. And it
Mhm.
is something that very much, like maybe up until very recently, all of the information about it has been providers to providers. It
Yeah.
has been experts talking to experts. And so it's really hard, especially when you have something like SIRS and you have brain inflammation.
Right.
It's hard to understand.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Hard to weed through all of that. But you also are very curious and you like to learn. So you didn't stop, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was diagnosed with SIRS in May, like we said, started treatment in June. The Shoemaker protocol, which is the only clinically proven path to healing from SIRS, takes 12 to 18 months. I'm now 12 months in, and I probably have 6 more months of the last step. But I would say I feel 100%, but it's the weirdest thing because, like here to your face, very honestly, I will tell you I feel 100%. And then next week you'll ask me, how do you feel? And I will say I feel even better. Like it's this weirdest thing of like, I feel like I've hit this peak and it just keeps getting higher.
Oh, that's exciting. That's amazing. I mean, truly. And the whole time, have you just stayed carnivore? Did you stay like I know that works for me, so I'll just do that.
Yes. So carnivore for me, it's like we were talking about this a little bit before you hit record, but I like to think of like every choice I make in my
Yeah.
life is choosing to live on easy mode or hard mode.
Right.
And I think when you eat a carnivore diet, it just eliminates a lot of the fluff from your life. You're not having all these additives or like confounding factors that might change your experience. So for me, maybe I'm just really lazy. And that's truly what the root of this.
You're
But
like one of the most creative people I know, especially with food. So I don't think that's it. But okay.
I just think carnivore allows me to live on easy mode.
You don't have to think about what vegetables you're going to be put. You know, you're going to only eat from the animal kingdom, and that makes it a lot simpler.
It does. And then it improves like tiny little things in my life that you wouldn't think are a big deal. Like before I was carnivore, I had dandruff.
Yeah.
And so like that was just something I had to deal with every day. Or like I would get canker sores all the time. And that
Oh
was
yeah.
just
All the time. Yeah.
something I had to deal with every day. And now like I don't deal with those tiny little like nuisances every day. Have you heard of the fork analogy?
No.
Okay, so are you familiar with the spoon analogy for chronic illness?
No.
Okay, so there's this spoon analogy for chronic illness where it's a way of explaining to people who don't experience chronic illness how much bandwidth you have. So if I were to give you like 10 spoons, that's how much bandwidth I have for the day. And then every time I do something, I take away a spoon. So like getting up and getting dressed, like that's a spoon. feeding myself for the day. That's a spoon. And so eventually you get to this point in your day where you only have 1 or 2 spoons left. And it's like, well, do I want to use those spoons to take care of myself today at the detriment of tomorrow, perhaps? But it's just like this concept of you have limited resources as a chronically ill person.
Got it.
But then there's this concept of the fork analogy. And the fork analogy is that you have all these forks sticking in your body, and they're different sized forks. And you can think of forks as like the nuisances in your life. And there might be tiny little like cocktail forks, and that's like every time you go to open your bathroom door, your robe is a little bit in the way. And so it doesn't close all the way. That's a tiny fork, right?
Right.
But then you're going to have big forks too, like you lose a job or you lose a loved one. Those are big forks. So the concept of the fork analogy is like, how can you remove as many of the tiny little forks in your life as possible so that those big forks are easier to take? So like, can you move your robe so that it's not sticking in your door jab? This is highly specific because it's literally happening to me right now.
I was like, you got an issue with your robe, JC? What's happening? Okay.
I have a robe problem.
Okay.
But it's just this concept of like, how can you make your life a little bit easier? And I think carnivore removes a lot of forks. So it just feels like again, an easy default for me.
And the OCD has not come back, correct?
No, not at all. And I have found that really incredible given how much neuroinflammation I had with SIRS. I did feel depression, and I recognized that as I was going through it. And there's some stuff there with SIRS, specifically why it would manifest as depression versus like an OCD type disorder. But yeah, I never had the compulsions again. And I found that really incredible. As like a third party viewing myself from the outside, it's like, why didn't that really happen to you again? It's fascinating.
That is fascinating. I think that's pretty amazing. And so I'm just happy that that's one fork that's now out of your head, because that toddler that's in your head was a pretty big fork. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I like the fork analogy too, and just taking away the smallest things. And what I noticed, I had been carnivore maybe less than a year even, and I lost my dog, beloved, like tragically lost my dog. It was horrible. And I had, I don't know, like a handful of blueberries or something that was at my mom's. And right after he died, and I noticed right after he died, of course, I was really sad, but I also felt like I had the capacity to handle it. I don't know how to describe that, but there weren't little forks. You know what I'm saying? There wasn't. And then I had, I guess, a couple of blueberries. I think I had some zucchini or something. And I felt like I could not handle his death. Like just it was subtle and yet not subtle. But I don't know if that's a fork or whatever, but I just noticed I could handle things better when I was just eating a carnivore diet than when I was adding the carbs.
Well, interestingly, I think zucchini has sulforaphane in it, which is it specifically attacks your neuroreceptors. So people who eat things like cruciferous vegetables may experience mental health issues. So it's not just the lack of carbs, it's also the absence of plant toxins, which makes a meat-based diet so powerful.
Right. And nobody knows about that except for all of us that learn about that, because I think people are really shocked at how much their mood improves when if they just increase their meat consumption, first of all, but then when they really understand the plant toxins. So I didn't understand that until later, when I really started, looking into the anti-nutrients that are naturally in plants, right? But I didn't necessarily relate that to mental health until I experienced it myself. Like when your anxiety goes up, or you feel like you cannot handle something in your life, and you're like, can it really be related to what I'm eating? And it absolutely is related to what you're eating.
Isn't it crazy looking back and you think, oh my gosh, that's how I felt all of the time.
All the time. I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. It's just like when you're saying, like I say I'm at 100% right now, but next week when you ask me, I'll say I'm even more. I feel even better. I wish that experience for everybody on the planet. Like whatever's going on for you, however you can heal, to the point you didn't even know that you were feeling that bad because you felt that way all the time. It's crazy to me. So when people have SIRS, the brain fog, I mean, it makes sense that you would have some depression. Well, first of all, a conversation like that with your doctor who says, "No, I don't think this is a flare. I think this is your new normal." And you're like, "No, this cannot be right." Like that in itself could create some anxiety, some depression, but SIRS in and of itself, but because it's inflammatory, because you have so much inflammation, you're going to have brain fog. And it would be, my guess is that it would be normal to have some depression.
Oh, 100%. It's fascinating now talking to so many people who have SIRS, and we have such overwhelmingly shared experience of what SIRS is like, or even finding SIRS where initially you're like, no, no, no way, not me. And then you're like, okay, I'll peek in this Pandora's box. But with the depression, it's very fascinating because one of the big things with SIRS is you have cytokines in your body, which are inflammatory proteins.
Hmm.
And they attach to receptors on the pituitary gland, which eventually leads to you having low MSH or melanocyte stimulating hormone. And this hormone has so many functions in the human body, and it's what makes SIRS a multi-system, multi-symptom illness. It
Hmm.
regulates like the tight junctions in your gut. So people will have GI issues with SIRS,
A lot of, yeah. Hmm.
but it's also it helps with your dopamine regulation and receptors. And so if you have low MSH, you aren't uptaking dopamine the way you should be. And so a lot of people with SIRS have dopamine issues, and they like I've heard in the arthritis groups that I belong to before I found SIRS that a lot of people take this thing called low dose naltrexone, and it helps with dopamine regulation. And it's
Hmm.
like, oh man, all those people have SIRS. That's how I
Right.
feel now.
Right. Well, and it's supposed to help with inflammation, but really they're not treating the real issue. Yeah, that's a shame. Imagine so many people have SIRS that don't know that they have SIRS because it manifests differently in different people.
hmm 25% of the population have the genetic haplotypes for SIRS, and 50% of buildings, according to the EPA, are water damaged. So if you have 50% of buildings are bad and 25% of people have the genes to make them susceptible to SIRS, that's probably 40 million people in the US alone, which is a crazy number. And it's like how much chronic illness is really SIRS? And how much could people really achieve root cause healing rather than just the symptom management that our current healthcare system prescribes?
Right. Yeah. And that was the big thing for you, is trying to get the right help. And I love that you have the SIRS group, because now it's not just practitioner to practitioner. You have people, you all have SIRS and are helping each other, but you also have the information in a way that people can hear it, that it's not so complicated that you don't know what people are talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So Barbara, my co-founder of the SIRS group, and I were diagnosed around the same time, and we were like, thank goodness we have each other through this because it's so hard to handle something like that alone. And so we created the SIRS group that you mentioned, which is a support community, but we also have an Instagram page where we try and share SIRS information in a really accessible way, and then provide resources to dig deeper if you are interested in learning more.
Yeah, because almost everybody I know that has SIRS has digestive issues. That seems to be like a big, and the brain fog. That seems to, but people can have, like you were having to walk with a cane. We're in so much pain, and some people don't have that level of problem. So it can vary.
Yeah, but we have noticed that there seems to be like archetypes of SIRS. Like they're the people who have GI issues. Barbara is someone
Yep.
who has the GI issues. And then there's me who has like the arthritic or it triggers an autoimmune condition. And then
Yep.
there seems to be this group of people who have more like neuroinflammation symptoms, whether it's brain fog, depression, or like chronic fatigue, where they just cannot get up in the morning, cannot like live a normal existence because they have chronic fatigue.
Right.
Oh, sorry, one more. Histamine or mast cell activation syndrome seems
Mhm.
to be that fourth archetype where people just react to everything. But for a lot of people, that manifests as GI issues. So they're kind of like buddies with that group.
That's yeah. Yeah, MCAS is really interesting to me, those mast cells. Because and I think what's important is that people, if they're curious, if they're like, well, I feel awful all the time, then just at least check it out. And for you, it was mold. So the toxin that you had been exposed to, you were sure, right? Or pretty sure that it was.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. So I have the genetic haplotype for mold specifically, and I also have one called multi-susceptible, which is like the fun one. It's the
Everything.
Uno wild card. You can be any of the biotoxins can impact you. And recently they have found that long COVID is one of the biotoxins. So I also got COVID, so that may have contributed. But I think it was mold because I moved from Colorado to Florida, and then that's when I started getting sick. And then when I moved back to Colorado and I was doing the shoemaker protocol, I felt so much better. So I really think it was the mold exposure for me.
Yes. And I'm just thinking for people that have long COVID or have had a situation, it might be worth them looking into SIRS and see, because whatever treatment, well, I can tell you from my son's diagnosis, the treatment is nothing. I mean, it's not, nobody knows what they're doing, and it's not very helpful at all. And for him, it's manifested with a lot of anxiety.
Mm.
So just really and GI stuff. So I think it's helpful for people to go to look into the SIRS. I mean, the SIRS, to
The
look at the
SIRS.
SIRS and see if that makes sense, because that treatment, I mean, you can go 12 months in and you can feel 100% and maybe even more next week.
Maybe
So,
even more.
yeah, that's amazing. So that to me is a much better outcome than what people have with other kinds of when they go through other kinds of treatment that's just not working.
And like just to circle back a little bit, because I think you're going to find this fascinating, but melanocyte stimulating hormone, which is one of the hallmark, if it's low, it's a big deal in SIRS. But melanocyte is melanin, meaning skin, and so sun exposure, vitamin D, all good things for people with SIRS. So if you do think you have SIRS, and it's really easy to get diagnosed, there's a symptom cluster test you can do, and then you do this visual contrast sensitivity test, which tests your ability to see blurred lines, which is impacted by the biotoxins directly, but also the chronic inflammation clogs the tiny capillaries in the back of your eye, so you lose the ability to see blurred lines. And then you would get the blood work for the haplotypes and then the innate immune markers that are impacted by SIRS. But if you think you may have SIRS, or you get diagnosed and you're waiting to work with a practitioner, there are things you can do to start feeling better now. One of those things is getting more sunshine. If you can tolerate it, like some people have histamine reactions to it, but if you can get sunshine, it's such a powerful way to kickstart your healing.
Yes, I would say ketosis and sunshine, the two together are pretty powerful, even though keto might not be quite enough. Like for you, like depending on what all is going on when you were keto, you didn't feel nearly as good because it was so hard to stay on as carnivore. But people could do a keto carnivore type diet. And then the sunrise, so sunshine, but the frequencies of light, you can actually prime your body. So if you're somebody who has a lot of problems with histamine and mast cell activation from the sun, you can prime your body by being out in sunrise and sunset. And then it actually primes your body to be out longer times in the middle of the day. You just have to go slowly.
Oh,
So
that's such a good tip.
I know. I was like, I need to come talk to the SIRS group about the quantum health strategies, because you add the quantum health strategies to what you're already doing, and I think you can like blow your healing out of the water, which would be
Yeah,
amazing.
that would be amazing.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do that if there's an opportunity to do that. That would
Oh,
be
100%. We would love that.
yeah, it'd be fun, because there are things that are going to help your mitochondria so that you're going to feel better, especially for chronic fatigue and all of that. So, yeah, so it'll just support your healing that much faster.
Yeah, and SIRS is by definition a mitochondrial disease. So that would be incredible. We would love to have you on.
Yeah, well, and mitochondria is just, people are like, wait, what's the mitochondria? So healthy mitochondria drive health, and dysfunctional mitochondria drive disease. So any disease somebody has, any problem that somebody has, it's going to be a mitochondrial issue at the root. So, and healing on a cellular level, as you know, that's where you have to go if you're going to feel 100%.
Or
Not
100% plus.
plus, yeah, you're not dragging yourself through life. So, do you have fear about it coming back, or about, I don't know, moving through life and having a flare up, or is that past?
So I do have the genetic haplotypes
Yeah.
that make me susceptible to biotoxins, and that's just a reality. I heard somebody talk about it as though like type 1 diabetics take insulin with them, and they just know that that's something they have to do just in case. And I
Mhm.
think for people with SIRS, it's like you can live a totally normal life. I've actually traveled a lot throughout my protocol, and
Mhm.
every time I travel, it's like I take a step back, but I bounce back faster every single time.
Okay. So
So
that
there,
gives you hope, and yeah.
and I know about it now, right? And I'm aware, and I think awareness is key. So I can have the tools in my toolkit that I need to take with me through life so that I can live a relatively or completely normal life, really.
Yeah. I was like, you're living pretty normal, right?
I don't think I'll ever describe myself as 100% normal
Right.
because
I
I'm a
don't know if
creative
we would,
weirdo.
yeah, I don't think we would want that, because then you
No,
wouldn't be like the ray of sunshine that I always look forward to talking to, because you'd be too normal. Yeah, but I do think that that's important, that people know that they can heal. And I think that's the biggest thing I get from your story, is that art, we're made to heal. So if we have the right circumstances and get the right information and the right treatment, then that's completely possible for people.
100%. I believe that 100%.
Yeah, which is exciting. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we didn't talk about, or anything else about meat in particular?
You know, I think this advice is going to go for whether you're looking into surge treatment or you're like, oh gosh, this carnivore thing, I'm a little nervous. Anytime you're looking at that piece of information that has been gifted to you by the universe, and you're like, oh my gosh, this looks like an incredible black hole that I just don't want to touch. I'm going to close this box. Just do the next step. Like you don't have to go from eating a standard American diet to eating carnivore. You can remove grains and sugar and seed oils as a step. And then as a next step, you could be like, okay, well, I'm going to remove the most toxic vegetables and then just keep taking the next step. And even if you get it wrong, and I think a lot of people with SIRS feel this way where they're like, oh man, I don't know if I should do this or this.
Mhm.
I think any choice you make that is with the intention of putting yourself towards better health is a good step because either it's going to make you healthier or you're going to learn from that experience and be like, I'm going to step that way next time. So just one step at a time.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's perfect advice, because, yeah, and if you're curious about something, I mean, you could try it, because you can always go back to whatever you were doing before. And you're right. If you could just get seed oils out, and the processed crap, that's huge for people. They're already going to feel better if they can just make that step. So, yeah. Anything that we didn't cover that we should have covered that you
Oh,
think?
I know we could talk forever, but
I know. I
I also don't want to overwhelm people.
I know. I was thinking about the soul, and like your thoughts about nourishing. Well, I don't even know if you believe in a soul, but nourishing your body, mind, soul. Like, what is really nourishing to you right now?
Okay, so not to directly answer your question, but to answer it in a tangential way. So when I was going through my SIRS treatment, I still had this lingering depression for a really long time. And I realized what I needed was I just had this innate feeling that I needed to pursue more joy in my life.
Yeah.
And so I stumbled upon this book called The Joy Plan.
Uh-huh.
And it was like a switch flipped for me. Overnight, my mindset changed from one of being really pessimistic and cynical to being optimistic and like actually looking forward to every day. And it's the best book because it's a combination of like woo woo concepts, but backed up by science. So I loved it.
Yeah.
But it also gives you practical steps you can take, and they're very like accessible steps you can take to adding more joy to your everyday. So she talks about things like she spoils herself with her favorite food every single day. So she loves papaya and it's more expensive, but she just was like, I am going to prioritize eating papaya every day. And so prioritizing whatever brings you joy every day.
Mhm.
So for me, that's bacon. I know that objectively bacon is not the absolute best meat for me, but it is the absolute best meat for my soul
Right.
because it
Mhm.
makes me happy. And
Mhm.
she has a lot of other practices in that book that I could talk about forever. But I do think it's so important. It's such a neglected piece of the health space is
Mhm.
your body is the only place you get to live. And so yes, we need to prioritize physical health, but you are the only soul you ever get to experience. And like in terms of relationships in your life, you have to be with you for the rest of your life. So why not be with someone you love and appreciate and are kind to? I think we spend so much time being unkind to ourselves.
That's true. That's true. I think that's so important. And I really feel like what feeds your soul, even if the whole world says that's not good for you or you shouldn't do it or whatever, if it feeds your soul, I think it's really important to keep that until you don't feel like it maybe serves you anymore or whatever. But I just think that there are certain things that just feel good to our soul. And when we find them and we know what they are, I think it's important to incorporate that. And I know for me, I think I've done some foreboding of joy because of if I worry and I'm anxious about things that somehow it's going to make it turn out well. It's like, I know that that's not right, but I have a hard time keeping myself from doing that, like staying in that worry space. And just to pivot out of that, I love these simple practices that could help you consciously bring joy to your life every day.
So
I,
really quickly, my favorite practice from that book.
yeah,
I am somebody who experiences a lot of negative self-talk. Like
yeah,
I'm really hard on myself.
yeah.
And so she talks about, first of all, you have to name that negative voice in your head. And I
Mhm.
call mine Naggy Nelly.
Uh-huh.
And then you get to talk back to her.
Mhm.
So you're gonna laugh because you know me and you know how much I love to create and put things out into the world. But I have this negative talk in my head that says, you are so lazy.
Yeah, you say that a lot and you're so not. Like, oh, but okay. Yes. Yes, I've heard you say that. Mhm.
Yes. So it's an internal voice. I manifest that externally, and everyone around me is like, that is the craziest thing that anyone could say about another human being. Like, you are not a lazy person. And
Mhm.
so now whenever Naggy Nelly is like, you're lazy or you are not enough, everything is from a place of like feeling not enough.
Right.
Any of that negative talk is like, you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, et cetera, et cetera. So
Right.
anytime she says that to me, I laugh at her now and I'm like, Nelly, I am not lazy. Like, calm down, girl. And someone reached out to me. I shared this online and she had the best perception of this because she was like, I named my voice too. And she was like, and I just tell her, you know what? I've got this. I don't need your help right now. And so she even talks to her negative self-talk with kindness. And I was like, oh man, that's next
Oh, that's
level.
sweet. Yeah, instead of saying, "Yo, Nelly, I don't need your talk right now." I mean, yeah, to be like, "It's okay. I know you're trying to help me, but I
Hmm.
don't need that right now." Yeah, that's much nicer than but
I
it
know.
makes sense that those of us who are having negative self-talk would then be negative to the self-talk person label or whatever. Yeah, that's just funny. But I love that. Negative Nelly. I mean, of course, who doesn't have a negative Nelly hanging out that we could talk to and say, okay, now, because I mean, I've heard you say that you're lazy, and I'm like, who builds a carnivore cake that is gorgeous that's lazy? I mean, that just doesn't even happen. Yeah. And you do so much for the community and putting information out there, and you're very honest. And I really appreciate that in a non dogmatic way of like, you're not telling anybody what they have to do. You're just saying, here's something that you might like or might work for you. So it's interesting that you're so positive. You're seemingly so positive, but everyone has these limitations. So to be able to name it and call it what it is and then talk back to it, I think that's brilliant. Love it.
Yeah. I'm just pulling everything out of my closet this year. I just like all of my dirty little secrets I'm just putting online. Like I recently did a video about having a shopping addiction and using shopping
Mhm,
as a way of coping with
mhm.
negative feelings rather than like actually dealing with my feelings. Um, I think there's such a powerful thing about being authentic and being authentic with other people where then they feel they can be authentic with you. Like
Mhm.
it's just trading authenticity and it's just making everyone better and stronger. And like me saying talking about Naggy Nelly and that person reaching out to me and saying, I just tell her thank you, but I've got this right now. Like that made me a better person because I shared something that made me a better person.
Right. Yeah, and now we're sharing it, and hopefully other people I love that that's gonna keep going, but the authenticity, I think the vulnerability of that, and you have had some not so nice people online, so the fact that you're still brave, I mean, at least I remember it's probably a while ago, like, some people not being very nice, and I can get very protective, so I'm like, and I think you have plenty of your meat fam that will get protective of you, but to continue to show up and be brave and be vulnerable so that you can be more authentic because you know that there are people that are going to resonate with it. And then there are the people that can't, they're like negative Nelly all the time in their real life. Like they can't hear it. They can't process it or something. I don't know.
I think this year more than any other year, I had um, someone I love very much send me a 5-page letter about someone I love very much and have always tried to live up to their standards, like always wanted to make this person very proud. They sent me a 5-page letter of everything they feel I have done wrong in the past 7 years of my life, not even to them, just wrong in my life.
Oh,
And that sounds really harsh, but
yeah.
it was the best gift I have ever been given. It was this gift of freedom of like, everything you have tried to do to make this person proud has just been thrown back in your face. So why not just be yourself and let go of these shackles of like what you thought this person wanted you to be your entire life? And so like this letter like literally changed my life in the best way. And I think if they heard me say this, it would make them mad because clearly
Yeah,
that was
not
not
the
the intent of
intention. Yeah.
their letter. But I have just realized like absurdism. We live on this giant rock hurtling through space.
Mhm.
Might as well make it the best, most awesome, weirdest experience that we can.
Absolutely. Because all we really have to do is have a life. Like that's it. And we're doing that. So
Mhm.
I mean, so make mistakes, don't make mistakes, make some, I mean, like whatever. It's totally fine. I love that that was freeing for you. I don't know. I might have had to take to my bed. Like for a few days, I'd be like, I don't know. That seems like it would be really hurtful. But I love that it was freeing because that feels like a choice to me.
It
It
was
feels
not immediately freeing.
okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad like you are human first. And no, you're always human. But right, that's gonna sting. But if it can actually help propel you into more authenticity, I mean that couldn't possibly work out any better than that.
Yeah, like I said, it's the best gift I've ever been given. And I know that sounds ridiculous to say.
Well, you say that about sirs too, which is interesting. Like, because then you may have just been going along thinking that you felt pretty good, and now you feel even better than you ever did. Or maybe not ever. Have you ever felt better than you do right now?
Oh, that's a good question. I was talking to someone in the service community the other day. She just had her home remediated of mold, and she said, I have this experience of feeling like I'm home. And the last time I remember having this feeling was when I was 7.
Wow.
And so I was that really stuck with me. And it's like, I think that when we're completely healthy, we
Mhm.
have that feeling of being home. And I think there's still some growth I need to do to have that feeling, but I don't think I could identify like a time period in my life that I felt better than I do now. I just believe I can feel better.
Right. Right. I believe that for you too. And I think it has more to do with being more and more authentic than anything else. Like your soul being happy and joyful and shining through because you obviously you know how to take care of the physical stuff. when it comes up. And you'll keep growing and learning there too, I'm sure. But the feeling better and better and better, I think, is a body, mind, soul thing.
Oh,
So
100%. Yeah, I definitely think it's soul work that I have to do now. And I feel so blessed to
yeah,
be able to work on that because I think when you are in that much physical pain, it's hard. It's really hard
really hard.
to focus on anything else. And so going through SIRS treatment, having my physical health back, now it's like, okay, now I have if I had gotten that letter when I was in the midst of my SIRS pain or before I was carnivore, it would have had an entirely different impact on me than it would have now. So I fully recognize it's such a privilege to be able to work on these aspects of myself. And I'm just so excited for like what the future holds for me and what I can accomplish and like how much better I can feel. I'm so excited.
I'm excited for you. Do you have any sense of what that kind of work is going to be for you? Because you found the book and created more joy in your life. I'm sure that whatever is next, but I just wondered if you already have some ideas of like how the soul work will, I don't know, take place over the next, I don't know, 6 months or a year or whatever.
I am definitely someone who gets a lot of like personal gratification from helping other people. Like it just I would rather give a gift to someone than be given a gift. I am that person. Like I just like I'm like, here's my present. I thought of you and I hope you like it because it's something I thought would match your soul. And so I just see myself expanding on that work and just expanding my work with people and kind of these like next level things of okay, I have the SIRS group, I can help people achieve physical health, but how can I make people like self-actualize and become the best versions of themselves? There's this quote by Elsie DeWolf, and it's kind of the quote of the year for myself. But she says, I will make everything around me beautiful, and that will be my life.
Oh, I love that for you because you do that. And I've watched you actually get, I know you're a girly girl too. You like the makeup and the clothes and the stuff. So I just watch you make things pretty around you, make things beautiful. And I know how pure your heart is and how much you help other people. So I'm so excited for you. That's making me teary. I love that. I love it. I think I mean, that is your life. So I'm excited to see how that unfolds for you because it might explode beyond what you are doing now and what you could ever imagine doing. So that'll be fun to watch.
You know, when I was in the most pain, I would just pray like, God, if I have to be in this much pain, make it worth it. Like make it help someone else. And so just being able to share my story about SIRS, and thank you so much for giving me a platform to do that. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, I love it.
Um, it's just such a blessing that not that I think all of our experiences in life have to have some greater meaning,
Mhm.
but it has been such a blessing to go through this experience and become physically well. And then through that, help other people become physically well. Like I feel so much gratitude.
Mhm. Mhm. And I know people feel so much gratitude for you and the fact that you help them. I know how helpful that is for people. So I'm thanking you for putting all that you do out there because you also have a regular job that you do on top of everything else that you do. So I mean, it's amazing. And I'm glad that you finally feel good and that you have the energy to do that because that's going to be more and more, I think, your existence. The better you feel, the more you give. And that's awesome.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you being here. I love talking to you. I think this was really powerful. We didn't just talk about food and SIRS. We talked about a lot of things, and I'm glad we talked about the soul a little bit. So I think it was a powerful conversation. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I love talking to you, and I know we could talk for infinite amount of time together anytime.
I know. I know. When we stop recording, then we start talking about other stuff and I know. But we'll just keep doing more. But more and more.
And we'd love to have you on the SIRS group and talk to the community.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. We'll do that for sure.